Welcome back to Photoshop for photographers. And today we're going to kind of combine what we've learned so far. And after we kind of go over and tone this image, then we're going to move on to some new stuff. So the first thing that we want to do, and you want to do this with any raw image. Now, if you're not shooting a raw image, you're going to skip. Now, if you're not shooting a raw image, you're going to have to skip this spot. But hopefully most people are shooting raw. The first thing we're going to do is pick our color profile. In this case, I've got a portrait, and I'm going to go ahead and pick portrait because I think that's going to work best. And then I'm going to come down here to my white balance. This is interesting. This is what's called mixed lighting. We have one color of light here and then a different color of light on the interior. This is a warm light. This is a cool light. And this is pretty standard when you're shooting indoors, that you get situations where you have multiple light sources that have different color temperatures. So we need to attack this differently. Now we can leave this warm and this cool. We can try to make this color and this color the same. Or we can purposely change whatever we want to change to make this image look however we want. There's not always a right way. It's really just subjective a lot of times, and you just kind of do what you want to do. So what we're going to do is just kind of take a look at some global adjustments here that I know this is going to need. So it's a little dark and a little muddy, and we're losing a lot of texture in this shadow areas. So the first thing I'm going to do then is go ahead and pop up that shadow area. Now I can come in here and go to auto color balance. Now that did get rid of some of the yellow and it changed this a little bit, maybe made this a little bit more blue. That's going to happen. Usually when you have a cool and a warm, if you make one more cool, you're going to make the other even cooler. And if you make it more warm, it's going to make everything more warm. So we're just going to be okay for there right now. We could take a look at this. It has a little bit of magenta in here in this face, which I don't want, but truthfully, it's not that bad. I can lower my contrast a little bit just so I have some more data to work with. And I think this is all I'm going to do is a global adjustment. Most of what I want to do is going to be a selective adjustment. So I'm going to come up here to adjustment brush, and we are going to take a look and do the subject first. Now I could tone this outside of this subway car with her as well, and I can show you what that looked like, or I might just decide to do her in one adjustment and then this in another adjustment. So what we're going to do here is, we know she needs to get brightened up. I'm going to come down here because this is giving me a default setting since this is sort of a newer program. And I'm definitely working in Photoshop 2020 now. If you see some things that look odd, it's just because maybe I'm in a new program and you aren't. All right, so we're gonna come and we can just kind of brush that over her face to see what this looks like. I'm just trying to get her. Because truthfully, I don't know if I really wanna brighten up this. I just wanna brighten this area up in here. And we're gonna brighten that. We're gonna open those shadows up a little bit so we can start to see some detail. And we're getting better values here. Let's see if we add a little highlight. Looks pretty good. Now, as you open up a photo, especially as we did like this, as you open it up a lot, it's going to become super saturated. That's pretty normal. So I'm going to go ahead and dial some of that warmth back out of the image because I don't know if I'm going to use it. Try to make this as natural as possible. And that looks pretty good. So I'm going to hold my Alt Option, and that's going to turn this into an eraser brush. And I'm going to erase what I did here on some areas. I just loosely selected her and kind of bled over, but I was okay with that because I knew I could come back in here after I made that adjustment. And you can see this is a hard brush. So we're going to slide back down here, and we're going, I guess the feathers, we're going to move this feather up, and just so we get a little bit softer edge. I just want to clean that up. Now I could zoom in there and do a really, really accurate selection, but I'm not going to sit here and spend the time with this for a tutorial. But when you're working on your image, you definitely should kind of get into those nooks and crannies and really make your selections or adjustments as exact as possible. All right, so that looks pretty good. So I've got this at a pretty good value. Everything else, I don't mind this dark. This light up here is a little bit bright, so I'll see if I can knock that down just a hair. So we'll come up and we're gonna go ahead and hit new, and I'm gonna hit the minus, or I'm gonna do minus and highlights, and then I'm gonna reduce my brush size down really, really small. We're gonna come over here and just brush over this area. Then I'm gonna slide my exposure as I can watch that get dark, and that looks pretty good. It doesn't have to be perfect. Now, overall, this image is a little bit warm. And if I slide this adjustment, it's gonna make everything warm. Personally, I prefer Photoshop to do a lot of this stuff, and because it lets me color correct selectively. The issue that you're gonna see here is when we go into HSL or do any sort of color correction inside of Lightroom, it's a kind of a global application. So we're gonna click on this little button right here. This is gonna give me color, and I either wanna change the color, which would be hue, and in this case, we're just gonna desaturate a little bit. So some of this orange and some of this yellow, just gonna desaturate it a little bit. I'm gonna go into hue, and it looks like my reds are getting a little too red. So we're gonna slide them this way, which is making everything a little bit more warm or orangish color. Now that's pretty good. I don't wanna do too much because I don't wanna suck too much color out or it will get gray. Plus, in Photoshop, I can be much more exact or accurate as I do this. And we're gonna go ahead then and just go ahead and hit open image and launch into Photoshop. All right, we are inside Photoshop now. Now I'm gonna bring up properties. I've moved it to a different location because properties has dramatically changed. Noticed we can change our mode, our bit depth. We can change some cropping and grid outlines that we have here. We can change guides. We can actually just do our image size right here. Just click on this and you get your image size. You can do your crop, trim, and rotate. It's amazing. They've added a whole lot of stuff inside of properties panel. So we're going to take a look at this and kind of decide what we want to do. Now we're going to, I think, brighten up the subject a little bit. So I'm going to make a adjustment curve. Now I don't think this needs any global adjustments, meaning where it affects the whole image. We're just going to be doing selective adjustments. So the question always arises. So I've showed you how to make selections. So I'm just going to make a simple selection with the lasso tool, and we'll increase this feather because I do want a feather to 44. And I'm going to make a selection on my subject because remember, I said, hey, I want to brighten my subject. So if I select my subject and then I click the curve adjustment level, you'll notice it automatically makes a mask where I made the selection. I can come in here and then make my adjustment, and it's only going to be applied to that specific area. That is the first way to do this. There is no right way. Photoshop is great at making multiple ways to do the same thing. I'm going to do the same exact thing, but in a completely opposite way. There isn't a right way. There's just a way that you prefer. Sometimes making a selection is the right way to do it, and sometimes I think just painting into the mask is a lot easier. So I'm going to turn this off. We're going to make a new adjustment layer, but this time I'm not going to make a selection. So I'm just going to come up to my curve, and I'm going to adjust it. But when I'm adjusting this, I'm only looking at my subject. If it's messing some other area up, I'm not really worried about that because I'm just looking at my subject. Since I didn't make a selection, the mask is all white and my adjustment is being applied everywhere. I could come in with my brush, and I'm going to make this brush bigger and kind of paint black everywhere I do not want the adjustment to happen. But that kind of takes a whole long time because that's a larger area than just my subject. So you can see I painted black where I didn't want the adjustment, but I wanted the adjustment on my subject. So since I didn't paint black on her, it is applied to her there. That's one way. We're going to turn that off. The other way is when you have your white mask to just hit Command I, that's invert. That will flip your mask from white to black. And then instead of painting black in the negative space, we're just going to go ahead and paint white in the area that I want to apply the adjustment. In this adjustment, I painted white in the mask to apply that brightness curves level here. And in this one, I made a selection and then made the adjustment, and it automatically made the mask for me. There is no right way. There's just whichever way is quickest and easiest for you. And I think this is what a lot of people have difficulty kind of reconciling and trying to figure out when they first start Photoshop. They don't know whether they should make a selection, or they don't know what they should paint in the mask. Sometimes they paint the wrong color in the mask. But it doesn't matter what you do, as long as you end up with a mask where part of it is being revealed and part of it is being hidden. So we're going to make another adjustment. And this time we're going to do hue saturation, and we're going to remove some of this yellow. So I'm going to come up here and hit hue saturation. Notice it's white. And we're going to go into yellow because that's what we want to get rid of. You can always see where your yellow is. And we're going to remove some of that yellow, a lot of that yellow. We want it a little bit warm, but not too warm. Now, the issue here is it's going to remove the yellow from everywhere because this mask is white. So once again, I can hit Command I. And if I just want to remove that warmth from this subway car, I can just paint white over the areas where the subway car is. If I want to remove some of the yellow from the subject, all I have to do is apply it to my subject. Now, there really probably isn't a lot of yellow in here, so I might be able to just apply it without painting anywhere since there isn't any yellow in this background. For instance, if I wanted to get rid of this blue in the background, I could simply make a new adjustment layer. So we have a new adjustment layer. And in this case, we're going to get rid of the cyan and some of the blue. Now I've removed those colors, but since there really isn't any blue anywhere else in this image, I don't need to apply it to a specific area because there is no blue here and isn't any cyan to remove anyway. So I can just leave it in that one specific spot. So what we're going to do here is I'm just going to clear these layers out and hit delete. And we're going to go over this a couple different ways. Your first way to apply a selective adjustment, and it doesn't matter what adjustment you're doing, you can make a selection. So I'm just going to circle her head and her hair. And then if I make an adjustment, it automatically makes a mask. Now, this is important to remember. Remember, I have this lasso and it has a feather. If you leave this at 0 and you select her face and you make an adjustment, it's going to make the mask for you. But an adjustment that doesn't have a feather is going to give you a hard edge. So you can see right here, here's that hard edge. You can totally see where I brighten that face up. You have to have a feather. What we're going to do is take this quick selection tool. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. We're going to go ahead and select our subject a little bit. So we'll select her hair and stuff like that. Now, remember, when you use a quick selection tool, there is not a feather like there is in the lasso tool. So when you use the quick selection tool, you have to go to select and mask. This is an extra step you're going to have to do. And then you're going to have to come over here and apply a feather to this image. And you will see the feather as you go. And the feather works just like the feather in the lasso tool. So we're going to go ahead and apply that feather. And instead of outputting to a layer mask, I'm just going to keep this as a selection and hit OK. Now when I come and make that adjustment layer, it's going to make that mask for me. But you can see it's a softer edge because I feathered it in select and mask. Now, that was kind of a slow process. It's probably a whole lot easier to just come in here, make this adjustment, hit Command I, grab my brush, and paint it in, and I'm done. For me, that process is a lot faster than it was going through that whole quick selection process. Now, quick selection is probably going to make a better selection, but I can make a very accurate selection. And what's great is And we're going to brighten this up a lot so you can see this. So I'm going to like way overdo this. The great thing about a mask is it's just a mask. It doesn't mess anything up. I can just flip this color by clicking here or hitting the letter X. And I can go back over that area with black in my mask. So all I'm doing is painting black in my mask to hide that from that specific location. Now it doesn't look good here because I made a giant adjustment, which I can dial that back out afterwards or later. If you have any comments or questions, you can leave those below. And as always, don't forget to subscribe.